children, right? That they experience in a direct way in their homes and in their communities. The chronic trauma that the National Child Traumatic Stress Network talks about. So, I also want to bring up the fact that children, particularly the children with whom we work, from Winnebago, from some of the urban areas, from some of the rural areas in Appalachia, our children experience historical trauma and the vestiges of that, right? That also leads to internal transformations that make it harder for them to accomplish the things that we're asking of them, like school readiness, for example. And what violence says is the invisibility of the 1-2 punch. I love that metaphor because it suggests that it is a violent attack on children. And trauma is violence, right? That is, blackness and poverty is brutal. So what she encourages us to think about is that our children are experiencing, many of them, not all of them, brutality on a day-to-day basis. And if you approach your children in that way, how you respond to them has to change. It has to change. So, you know, trauma has a lot of context. It doesn't just come by itself, right? Poverty, one of my favorite quotes is from Gandhi. And he says, poverty is the worst form of violence. Worst form of violence, right? So our children experience poverty, but they also experience tons of socio-contextual risk in their communities. Now we're learning all about what environmental toxins are doing to the brains of our children, right? They experience violence in their communities. They're experiencing violence in their homes, sometimes directed at them, not always, but sometimes directed at them. So not only do they experience trauma, we can argue that Viola Davis' 1-2 punch becomes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 punches in a row, right? And you know what that means for football players and boxers, right? Right? Affects the brain that end up, again, transforming our children to be in a place where they can't be ready for all the things that we're asking them to do, okay? And so what Viola Davis says is no one cares about the conditions in which the unwanted live. You're invisible. A blame factor that allows the more advantaged to be let off the hook from your misery. And one of the things that I thought about as I was preparing for this talk, which made me change my title, is that Central Falls, Rhode Island didn't have an Educare program for Viola Davis when she was a little girl. So we know that not all children, again, I want to make this clear, not all children, but a lot of our children, particularly young children, experience trauma. The data suggests that at least 2/3 of U.S. children by the time they're 16 experience a traumatic event. But if you go down to the little ones, like if you know the maltreatment data, most of the children who are maltreated in the first 5 years of life. In a community, we try to transform the community. We provide secondary supports for kids. Our early care and education environment is one of those supports. There was a colleague of mine who said the best mental health intervention is school, right? Because it has routines. It has adults who care, all the things that we know in Educare. And on the tertiary side, we are getting children through our mental health consultants and all that kind of thing who experience trauma the help they need. We are providing nurturing care, again, which is the best mental health intervention that is possible for these children. And I'm just going to read what this is. This is from a Lancet article. And you all know Lancet is like the premier medical journal, all the, famous medical people writing this. And this was one about international child development. I gotta read the last one. Single most powerful context for nurturing care, immediate home and care settings of young children, often provided by mothers, fathers, other family members, and child care services. So they call this out in this Lancet article about how we can give children what they need, and of course that's nurturing care. But how do children get a sense of safety and security? When they're around adults who are predictable, are consistent, right? Understands what they say and what they're going to do, and avoids chaotic and disorganized behavior. So again, what children experience in an Educare classroom. Safe classrooms have clear expectations, well-defined rules, time for transition, choices whenever possible, and attuned teachers. Basic, high-quality, early childhood education, which is what Educare provides. So lest you think this is not critical for children in trauma, read the Lancet article, okay? But if we're asking our teachers to do all of that, we gotta take care of them. We have to take care of them. And what we've learned from a lot of work that's it took us so long to get to this. Why, I don't know. But now the work is suggesting we gotta pay them. And in DC, we were talking about this on the way here yesterday. I don't know if you all have heard, the DC child care providers can make the VA in the next year or so $75,000 a year. It's about time, and of course, like my colleagues in DC were telling me, it's very complex, because one of the things I learned is sometimes the teachers can make more than the director, and we got a lot of work to do in DC. But at least we're starting to address the compensation issue, which a lot of states are doing, but DC is leading the way. It is leading the way, and maybe we'll see some other states go behind us. It's a different kind of place, and you all know it's not as like what happens in classrooms is strict. It also focuses on several principles, right? Safety. Everybody needs to feel safe. The kids need to feel safe. The families need to feel safe. The staff needs to feel safe. That it's a transparent organization where you know what's happening. The decisions that are being made are open to everybody, and you feel like you can trust management to make the kind of decisions. So it's not just about addressing the specific sequelae of trauma, it's these organizational things. Use of peer support, focus on collaboration, really shifting what power looks like. And one of the beautiful things about Head Start and therefore Educare is that our parents have a lot of power, right? We make sure that they are helping us with decision making. So that kind of shift in the power dynamics becomes important from a trauma-informed approach. But also humility and responsiveness. In other words, we are humbled by the fact that families deal with what they deal with and still show up, right? And I say that all the time to any of the parents with whom we work. I take my hat off to you. I'm not sure I can pull it off, to be quite honest, right? So humble in their presence, but also responsive to their needs at the same time. Okay. We ought to be screening and assessing, and I know a lot of our Educare schools do that, have specific interventions for children who we know have trauma, that we are working on incorporating interventions that address parenting particularly, and it has to be different. It's not like a didactic parent group. That's good for mostly all of our Educare parents. But if we've done a screening and know that a family has experienced trauma, we need to be making sure that they're engaged in certain evidence-based parenting interventions that help, right? Staff support for secondary trauma, and then of course collaboration with other agencies who address these issues all the time. We have a lot of Educare schools who are doing it. And I'm only pointing out 3 because they're actually doing sessions here, but I asked, could I call them out? Lindsay told me I could. So I'm calling out Washington, D.C., who's been doing a whole big staff wellness campaign. They have a connection with Georgetown, and they're doing amazing things. You'll hear about that here. You'll also hear about Kansas City's efforts, who are trying to bring in a whole bunch of different things, conscious discipline, all this kind of stuff, and you will hear from them. And you will also hear from Clayton, who's trying to do a sanctuary institute. If you all remember, that came out with the ACEs. So we're getting there, and Educare can be a buffer for children. So just in conclusion, I just want to say a couple of things, just to summarize. 1, we know trauma affects a lot of our kids, a lot of our kids. And I would argue, if you did these trauma screenings, you would find that at least 1/3 of your children and families are exposed to trauma, at least. And again, it depends on where you are. It has an insidious, getting down under the skin, as they call it, effect on children, and a pernicious effect, which means that when young children experience it, it's more likely to have long-term outcomes. But here is the good news, that Educare has situated itself to be a positive force in the lives of these children and can buffer them against the sequelae of trauma by doing what they do best, which is providing nurturing and safe care, first of all, trying to take care of their staff, and then integrating these trauma-informed practices into their work. So with that, I will thank you all, and thank you for this opportunity.
Y sabemos que hay esperanza.
Now is the time to make once-in-a-century advancements to our early childhood systems. Our voices reflect our lived experience and fuel us to drive change.
Ahora, presentamos la Educare 5.
5 public policies that matter most.
Para el futuro de nuestras familias y la fuerza de trabajo de los educadores en cada comunidad.
The Educare 5 builds on our extensive expertise to highlight how public policy must ensure all young children and families thrive.
We're here to talk about the new Educare Learning Network policy agenda. It was developed with your voice and the voice of others. It builds off of our Educare 2018 policy work group, and the timing couldn't be better for a policy agenda that is focused on Educare's 5 priorities. It reflects the need to rebuild and transform early learning and care in communities, states, and at the federal level to truly meet the needs of children, families, and early learning staff on the ground.
Priority number 1, universal child care and early learning. Families must have access to high-quality, culturally responsive early learning and care, and know where low-cost in settings they most prefer during times they need care.
What excites me the most and gives me hope about the policy agenda is that other families outside of myself will have the opportunity to receive high-quality care, and we can help spread the word to others that can benefit from our program.
La prioridad número 2 son las familias estables y con apoyo. Los niños pequeños y sus familias necesitan recursos financieros adecuados para acceder a la vivienda, cuidado, servicios y apoyos para prosperar.
This is an opportunity to transform our systems and institutions by centering children's needs and assets. This policy agenda means that in partnership with others, I will continue to address the racial disparities in workforce compensation, wealth and asset generation, and ensure that children have access to anti-bias, anti-racist, culturally grounded early learning settings. And most importantly, children are born healthy and thriving.
Priority number 3, a thriving early childhood workforce. Early childhood teachers and staff should be well compensated and supported in order to promote young children's learning, health, and development.
We know now more than ever before the importance of universal access to 3 and 4-year-old preschool and the importance of a strong and quality early childhood workforce. We feel that the Educare Learning Network's policy agenda allows us to extend this conversation beyond Flint, Genesee County, beyond Michigan, to let people know throughout the country, throughout the world, that early childhood educators are educators. Learning starts early, and these elements are essential to building strong families, strong children, and strong communities.
Priority number 4, healthy and supported children. Young children deserve consistent access to the physical and mental health supports and services they need to thrive.
I would like the decision makers to not only see the circumstances that families find themselves in, I would like for them to see the faces, the living environments, the mental, the medical, the health needs of the people of the communities that this will affect.
La prioridad número 5 es contar con sistemas sólidos para la infancia temprana en todas las comunidades, colaboración y coordinación entre sistemas de salud, sistemas de apoyo a la vivienda y recursos educativos para proporcionar la continuidad de la atención, servicios responsables y políticas de elegibilidad para las familias.
We need everyone, all of us, to get involved and stay engaged, because we know that our parents and practitioners bring a unique voice and authority to speak to federal, state, and local policymakers about how policy plays out at the operational level, the needs of young children and families, and how quality, affordable, and accessible early education programs contribute to lasting economic and social returns for our communities, for our states, for our entire nation. So let's do this, y'all.
Hats off to you, all of you at Educare. It's so great to be a national partner with you all, and we hope that everybody will get on board, because we know that what you're striving for is what we are all striving for at 0 to 3, and collectively, we need to get our acts together to make sure that we do all that we can for babies and families and the learning workforce. So thanks, and let's get to work.
Únase a nosotros para instituir a los formuladores de políticas a priorizar lo más importante.
Visit educareschools.org to learn more and take action with the Educare 5.
So that's amazing, right? Yes. So as you all saw from the video, that we, as a part of the network, are committed to policy priorities that we believe contributes to creating a path forward for advocating for policy issues and investments that support young children, families, and their communities. This session provides opportunity for us to learn more about early care and educating priorities at the federal level and the federal budget and what's happening in Congress. During this session, we will be talking with the panelists about our collective policy priorities, the resources available, advocacy opportunities, and how the Educare Learning Network Start Early and the First 5 Years Fund work together to partner with staff and families across the network to amplify our policy priorities and influences of change. We will save time at the end for questions, and we also have a lot of conversation around this, I'm sure. So you can see your Post-it notes that are sitting on your table. So if you have any questions, please feel free to jot them down, because we want questions and we want to be able to provide an amazing answer to every question that's being asked in the room. So with that being said, I can give a little information on why it's important for me to do the things that I do, and why it's important for me as a parent leader at Educare Chicago.
As previously stated, my name is Sharice Singleton Nobles, and not only am I here as a parent, I am excited because who knew that I would stand here 20 years ago? I was an employee, and it was called the Ounce. So, for me, this is a pleasure. This is an awesome opportunity. It's overwhelming. It's excitement to see everyone in person, and now to stand here as a foster, now adoptive parent of our son has been an amazing journey for me. So the 3 years that I'm back now as a parent, this is amazing, and it makes my work here even more special, because why not have my son be a part of Educare Start Early? On last month, I was provided the opportunity with a bunch of amazing other parent leaders to attend the Parent Ambassador Institute. It was held in Washington, D.C., and we were able to meet a ton of amazing individuals at that particular conference. So if you are here, because I see you in the building, please stand if you attended this.
Push the limits. It's an adventure that will challenge all 5 of her senses through high-quality early childhood education. She'll learn about her world, how to read it, how to figure it out, how to work with others, and how to succeed. Unfortunately, less than half of the children in America get to experience this developmental adventure. We have a roadmap for making sure each child can get it and help every child succeed in their quest to grow stronger.
Our journey on this picture. In about the spring of 2022, our leadership team got together to think about what do we want for the future. So what we noticed was going back to the basics was really important. We needed to go back to connection, to building those and all of those that kind of were put on pause when we were in person learning or when we were distancing ourselves from being and children. So we started with baby doll circle time. Is anybody familiar with that weight loss discipline? Yeah. We love our baby doll circle time. So that builds connections and supports those social emotional relationships with children, their caregivers, and allows them to kind of work on those crucial social emotional skills. Some other things that kind of guided our approach to this was an easy developmentally appropriate education treatment, specifically on reciprocal partnerships with families. It's something that I turn to as a supervisor a lot, and it helps me guide the teachers that I support in the way that they communicate and their work experience. The other thing that we use is touch points approach. So we assume that touch points assumes the parent is the expert of their child. And that's at the foundation of our work. The parents know their child the best, and as educators, it's our job to remember that and to remind them when they're maybe not remembering that themselves. And then the next thing that we talk about is the ideal classroom outcomes. We want all families and children to not only feel like they're accepted, but that they belong in that classroom and that they have a decision, their own choices, and they have a say over that classroom, and that they haven't been accepted for a while.
So we recognize that with COVID restrictions, there was some feelings about coming back into the building and into the classroom, because prior to that, families were expected to wait outside the door. They were entering from the sources outside, and so connection was minimal. And let's just call it what it is. They were getting brief moments during drop-off and pickup as all the families were coming and trying to pick up their kid in the hallway. And so we wanted to know from them what they wanted those interactions to look like as they re-entered the classroom. And building the connection in person was learn about their needs, their expectations of the classroom, and just, you know, the connections that they expected from us.
So some of the things that the classroom almost immediately noticed was that with no restrictions limiting their communication and interactions, the families were staying longer at drop-offs. Oftentimes, there were family members that were staying 20, 30 minutes, and they were playing with their child, but not only that, they were engaging with other children and building relationships and connections that are so important. Families were asking about their child's development, and having supported different types of behaviors. So they were learning from the teachers and how the teachers were interacting, and they were bringing those things home to do with their children at home. And so when we think about that, as a supervisor who I can kind of step back and see what's going on, the adults were seeking those connections just as much as the children were. All the children were really excited to build relationships with those family members, and the family members were just as excited to do the same thing.
Okay, so I did kind of a write-up on my initial reactions to what it was like inviting these families into my classroom for extended periods of time. It's very raw, it's very real, and I think that a lot of educators in the classroom will relate to it. So families have a desire to stay longer during drop-offs and pickup, and honestly, at first, it was stressful. I felt like my classroom was being watched and that I had to entertain these family members while also trying to keep a consistent watch on other children and carry out morning and afternoon routines. I had to do a little reflective practice with my supervisor and understand where my frustrations were coming from. So was this because I actually had to entertain them, or that it was disrupting routine, or was it that I got so comfortable and accustomed to families not being in the classroom and all the COVID-19 restrictions that it just needed to be reintroduced to me and become a solid part of routine instead? Obviously, this came with some difficulties, especially around conversations of confidentiality. There were a few instances in the beginning where I had to have conversations around families handling other people's children, and asking questions about challenging behaviors. While these family members stayed for 20 plus minutes, they were seeing some of the behaviors that within the classroom we were already working on and addressing, including their own child. And I had to learn to answer these questions in a way that focused on development and not the individual child's needs. So I reached into my teacher toolbox and used the touchpoints model heavily and often as a resource with families. I would say, let's take a look at that together. And I would pull up the anticipatory guidance and we would look together instead of it being me as the expert. We were related to at home and what they were doing there. Building the confidence that parents were the expert and had valuable information to share. I became pretty skilled at turning an uncomfortable conversation into a teachable moment. From those conversations, I thought about the ways in which all families could have an active role in my classroom. Not just a brief hello or goodbye, but an actual part of the whole classroom. For the specific family who sparked this, the opportunity to hang out in my classroom provided them play with their grandchild, and it was very clearly important to them. But I thought, how can I make this beneficial for everyone? Starting out with a simple story read invite, I asked if the grandparents would come read if you gave a moose a muffin to the class and join us for breakfast. So a member of our kitchen staff came the day prior and made banana muffins with the children, and the next morning the grandparents came and did the story read, and we all sat down and enjoyed the muffins together. Children were excited. They were building connections with these grandparents. They were running up for hugs. They were pulling on them to come and join them and play, and requesting even more stories to be read. They became just as important to the classroom as any bit of curriculum or other educators. This was the chance to extend meaningful connections and bridge the gap in parent involvement.
This has been a trial and error process. And I'm going to repeat that. This has been a trial and error process. I have gotten pushback from other teachers and supervising staff saying that they wouldn't have the patience or wouldn't know how to even get started with this. I am not an expert. This is an ongoing goal in our classroom for families to be an addition and be in addition to curriculum as well. But I can say that it takes an open mind and it does get frustrating at times, but it's also really rewarding. To see how excited the other children get and the positive feedback from families was proof that this was the right idea to start. This is kind of just the connection I was talking about the if you give a moose a muffin. So that is an image of our kitchen staff coming in and making the banana muffins with the kids. And then the next day, we all gathered together in our gross motor room and sat down and read the story. The grandparents read the story. Which afterwards we realized that maybe the gross motor room wasn't the most appropriate place to have a story read, but it was nice to watch the children kind of run around and play and then gather back to the grandparents and sit down with the story,
So what we noticed, all children built connections and became familiar with these other family members. And families were able to share what learning and engagement looks like at home and also know that what we're doing at school. So we can replicate what they're doing, they can replicate what we're doing, and parenting is built on trial and error, just like teaching is. So where we have some more of the background and the understanding of child development, the parents bring the piece where they know their child best. So when you merge those two, you can find where that child is in their development and you can support them both at home and at school.
The great part too was that I was having parents asking for resources, and we were partnering together to come up with solutions to challenging behaviors that were happening at home. And so a parent was excited to try some of the conscious discipline tools that I provided her. We printed out I love you rituals, we printed out intention cards, prompts for language, so I notice or use scene statements, and she couldn't wait to tell me the next day that she had taped them to different areas of her apartment so that in moments where she was feeling frustrated or overwhelmed with her child's behavior, she could look to those for support. So, you know, strengthening parents' confidence is what we're here to do as educators, and understanding that, you know, every child is unique and has different needs, so.
One of the next things that we decided to do was to share toddlers, and I don't think many do, and that's okay because they don't do the work that we do every day. So we decided to videotape Ashley and her assistant teacher Morgan, and they did kind of like a mock curriculum planning where they didn't use kids' names, but they walked through the process. So our process, we start with the child. What do we know about this child? Their interests, their dislikes, and their goals that are set with families. So once we get that picture, we move on to the classroom environment. So the classroom team will talk about what are we having in this environment that's going to support this child's goals. So if they're working on language, like what prompts are we having around the classroom? Do we have sign language? Do we have things labeled? Maybe different stories or songs that we're going to sing to promote that language development. And then the third part of our curriculum is how adults are going to interact. So that on our curriculum form doesn't say how teachers are going to interact, it's how are the adults going to interact. So really getting parents involved was key to that, because it's not just us with their child, they're with their child too at home. So that was a really big motivator for us to share this video. We're not gonna play it right now, but if anybody's interested, I'll gladly share it with you. It is a great video.
So I also sent out, so the parent app that we use is called Talking Points. Talking Points allows for parents to either download it as an app or for it to come directly to their phone as a text message. And I wanted to see what families were interested in the development of their child and what kind of curriculum ideas they wanted to see. So I sent out a poll. The initial poll was all about the development domains, so what area of development they'd like to see. And after that came back, we moved on to a second one, which was all about activity planning, which I wasn't shocked that cognitive was the one that parents were most excited about, because science and math, and that's the fun stuff. So they chose primary color mixing, and when the children engaged in the activity, we took photos, shared that with families. But what I want to highlight and point out about this is that the return rate was average. We got 60% on the first one and only 30% on the other, and I think this data is real. It's realistic because not all parents are going to be able to take time out of their day to engage in something like this. But we wanted them to feel like their voices were being heard and mattered regardless of them being able to participate.
I have a question.
Sure. So outside of just the if you give a moose a muffin, families were excited about these story reads. I don't think they realized that this was something they could come in and do. And so it happened on multiple occasions. Children were excited because they got to pick their favorite book from home to bring in, which built homeschool connection. And we encouraged families to use classroom materials. So as awkward as many of them felt, they were using puppets and finger play and story baskets right along. Often their children sat with them in their laps to join them for the story reads. So here's some images of some of our family members. And as you can see, many children were engaged. They were excited to build these connections too with these family members. So it was really special to get to watch connections outside of just ours with the children, and the children with other parents as well.
So another step that we took to kind of shift the mindset from teacher as the expert versus parent was to use developmental resources with the families. So what I mean by that was that we didn't just show up to a parent-teacher conference and say, here's the data, here's what it means, and that's it. But it was a parent would have a question on a behavior, and they would pull out the guides, they would pull out their information. The same process that we do as educators, we involved the parents and we were vulnerable and let them see, I don't know that information, but here's how I'll help you find it, and here's what we'll do together. So we used our resources like the touch points approach, our ASQ data, DRDP, which is our observation and assessment data, and Ashley can speak to your pictures.
Yeah, so I wanted to try something out at parent-teacher conferences with our DRDP data. So I printed out images of the child doing any activity, them playing outdoors, whatever it may have been, and provided it to the parent. And then I took all the DRDP domains, the learning domains, and printed off the checklist for it and asked families to just observe the photo and check off any areas of development that they thought their child was working on simply based off that image. And the point was to show that, when we're observing their child or we're looking at a picture of them, all of the different skills that we're able to see them building. And a lot of families were super excited about this. They, obviously didn't realize how many skills they could observe simply from a picture of their child. It wasn't just them finger painting, it was them learning fine motor skills. So it was a great way to connect them to our observation piece and the way that we use that to set goals for them later on. So, that was that. So some other outcomes were that in my
a friend of mine came to school today.
Reese is a friend of mine, friend of mine, friend of mine. Reese is a friend of mine who came to school today.
I've been an Educare parent since 2013. Throughout these years, I've built many great relationships with the staff and other families. I've had 5 children enrolled in this program, and knowing the staff has made each transition that much easier. When COVID first happened, my younger children were in Educare. There were so many changes that occurred. We could not go in the building, masks were worn, and drop-off was done outside. This made it difficult to build relationships with the new staff. Thankfully, when my youngest daughter was an infant, she started and was put into classroom 7, where I already had another child previously. I don't think I could have transitioned her if I hadn't known the staff. I'm grateful for these amazing people. I try to be as involved as I can in the classroom, but I'm a busy mom enrolled in nursing school and working part-time, so my free time is limited. I try to take my time each day with drop-off if I can. I have a story to read to the classroom, and I try to make my appreciation known. The teachers are wonderful at making me feel included. We have open communication, and it allows us to ask questions to each other and feel a mutual respect.
So, what was it like getting to connect with your child in classroom 7?
It was very easy, very honest and open staff. All the teachers, the kids were great. We were both very welcome in the classroom every time we came in, and it just made it connecting with everybody that much easier.
The teachers in this classroom truly go above and beyond. This year, my child will transition out of their class, and it's emotional for me. This is not a classroom, it's an extended part of our family. I say this with complete sincerity. The connections between my daughter and her teachers is strong. I feel comfortable dropping her off, even if she's having an emotional start, because I know she's safe. They have such compassion. She's a child who likes the comfort of her people. This is noticeable when there are different staff in the room because she immediately searches for one of her teachers. Brittany isn't Alina's teacher, but she was the teacher of my oldest child and is now a supervisor who occasionally helps out in the classroom. And Alina gets just as excited to see her.
What did your participation look like?
Well, we came in for book reading and read to all the kids that were there. We came in and we barely just came and left. We came in to hang out and see all the kids who got to know us pretty well. And again, felt very welcome and open.
The biggest barrier for me is turnover. I struggle when there are a lot of staff changes because I don't like confusion and stress for my children when they adjust. Thankfully, this hasn't been an issue I've experienced for a while, and I'm so grateful. Each teacher brings something special to the room, and I will forever have a place in my heart for Classroom 7.
Hi, I'm Sophia, and my daughter Alchemy goes to Educare in Louisville, Maine. I wrote something about my experience with Educare, especially involving the teachers, and I'm going to share it with you. So my daughter is now 2. Her name is Alchemy. She started when she was around 9 months. There were some barriers in my life when I first started bringing her, like trying to get in the working mode again, and having to have my daughter's grandparents bring her to Educare due to complicated circumstances at the time. My daughter also had a sensitivity to dairy for a while, and that was hard to maintain while she was in daycare because she would cry a lot, she needed extra comfort. But the Educare teachers listened to my wants and helped in the best possible ways they could by adjusting her milk to special milk, and she had a stuffed animal that she loves. She still loves to this day. They got it for her for that extra comfort. They went out of their way to find the exact one online, and they keep it at school for her, which this stuffed animal was not easy to find. While I wasn't present often in the beginning to bring her to school, they always made me feel welcome, and when I started bringing her, they made me feel like I never missed a thing. Educare giving me the opportunity to have daycare while job searching was immensely helpful because it gave me time to get back out and being social again and start working toward goals after being at home with Alchemy. I enjoyed being home with Alchemy, but Educare gave me that boost to start changing my life. Being a single mom and finding the right job that you enjoy and fits your schedule can be rough. I had trial and error jobs, but now I'm in a place I enjoy and have gotten my first apartment, a new car, and my daughter has fun, she learns, she has deep connections with her teachers and friends. Another barrier was COVID-19 precautions were happening when she started, such as parents wearing masks and toddlers. Luckily, my daughter wasn't at the age to wear one. We also weren't allowed to enter the classroom at pickup and drop off, but we were still involved in the classroom by pictures, videos, and being able to talk at pickup and drop off. There were also activities sometimes outside the classroom. Fast forward to now, I'm involved by the polls they engage us in for the curriculum, reading to the class, talking at pickup. We also can have parent-teacher conferences outside of school, and getting updates and artwork from my daughter and the teachers. My daughter's classroom has a crowd, and I think that's cool to experience same with my daughter. I feel connected to her teachers because they truly care beyond measure and never make you feel overbeared. They respect you and your child. They ask you how you're doing, not just your child. They know my story, and my daughter looks forward to going to school. I have made connections with staff and her teachers where I feel like I could ask them for parenting advice and resources, or just talk to them. My daughter and I are Guatemalan, and her leading teacher, Ashley, wanted to involve some of our culture in the classroom, which is just an example of the connection between home and the classroom. I have also been invited to the event in Louisiana, but I could not make it. I am very grateful for Educare and the teachers.
It just made it so much easier to, there were no obstacles to connecting with anybody.
Love them for questions and answers too. So what are we sharing today? I already heard we're going to share just a little bit of data from the parent surveys we conducted last year in the spring. We're going to hear from several program staff to give you perspective and insights from the field. We got a quick poll, we're going to pull some information from you all. And we got the invitations for all to engage with some Native American population. Oftentimes, over the previous years, we've not been able to share that, especially the staff survey, because the numbers are so small. I point that out because you'll see, you might see some things that stand out in the later slides that might stand out, just recognizing those small ends and contribute to that being highlighted. So the CARES Committee set out to take on the charge of asking these questions of parents about their experiences with discrimination, the ones that are the strike bars. And as you can see, there's a good bit of variability between parents of different races and ethnicity. The mean for parents who are Native American, Black, and our other category, are the highest. The other including mostly biracial families, and then some other groups, including
an executive function set of practices that people can incorporate into their current programming. What we heard from teachers is they wanted things that they could implement immediately. Don't have us go to a training and then wait to purchase materials and do that. No, give us things that we can implement right away and we can do it into our current things. Align with social emotional learning curricula that was already selected by schools. We did not dictate that. Schools got to decide which worked best for their sites. We partnered with the Early Science Initiative because a lot of executive functioning is also a lot of what science and STEM learning is about. So we partnered with Daryl's team at Miami to try to integrate and incorporate those practices. We piloted some small group interventions and programs such as the Brave Games. And then we really wanted to try to build staff capacity around how do you implement these practices with fidelity as part of classroom instruction. So the rationale, so why do we want to do this? What was the point of this? Well, one, a social emotional learning curriculum. What we know is we wanted to put together a strong base for developing social emotional skills. How many of you have heard from teachers when these kids go to kindergarten, like, they need strong social emotional skills, right? Probably everybody. Or how many of you are like, our kids are kind of struggling with behavior coming in. They don't really know about their emotions. That's what we hear a lot. So part of that was how we build that in. We also heard from teachers, like, people tell us to build relationships with our kids, but we maybe don't know how to do that on an intentional basis. So how can we build some of those practices in? And then having a common language for school sites. Mindfulness, we really wanted to put that in because it helps develop regulation skills for students and adults. And we wanted to build in effective strategies for handling stress and challenging situations. So again, if you think back to what Dr. Jones-Harden said, why would we want to do that? Why would we want to start giving them different strategies to use? And then finally, executive functions activities. We know that they are strongly related to kindergarten readiness and school achievement, and they are easy to integrate throughout the day. You can put them across your curricular areas. And here again, you can see the executive function, the curve there of when executive function skills, they build the most from ages 3 to 8. And so we are really trying to capture that time point of like saying, if we're intentional about providing practice here, can we make a difference in having these students have executive function skills that set them up for school achievement? So here, you can see that we have kind of a framework where sites got to select a curriculum or framework. And I just want you to notice that a lot of them did select conscious discipline, but there are others in there. So you might have paths, you had second step, there was a mind up framework, and so each site got to determine what was best for them. And some of them tried one, and it did not work well with their site, and they switched curriculum. And again, that was really up to the context of the site, what worked for their teachers and their families. And so I'm going to talk a little bit here about tight loose implementation. So I think a lot of times you see people saying, no, you have to implement it all the same. What we are saying is you need the kind of these core components because context matters. You know, where your kids are coming from, where your families are coming from, where your site is, what other strengths those matters. So they had the ability to select, and then when you hear the panelists, you'll hear about things that they maybe added that we allowed them to do. We paid for through the grant. So we did Peaceful Warriors, that was done in New Orleans. Fan consultation, a lot of you have heard about this reflective practice. Here for You for Them was about yoga and mindfulness activities. Chime was teacher well-being, trauma-informed training. And then a couple years into the grant, we had a lot of sites developing staff mindfulness and meditation rooms, kind of wellness rooms for their staff. All right, so when we talk about data, I'm only presenting a couple pieces today, but the sites were asked to collect quite a bit of additional data, especially around training and implementation of some of these mindfulness practices. Would this impact teacher burnout? And so we had a specific teacher burnout scale, and you can see here there was 3 different subscales: emotional exhaustion, depersonalization, and personal accomplishment. So emotional exhaustion, that's kind of self-explanatory, but it really is how emotionally drained are they from work? So you can see that one item was, I feel emotionally drained from my work. Some of it would be like, after I'm done with work, I feel more energy for the rest of my day. Those things indicate emotional exhaustion. Depersonalization, and this is really kind of an interesting where they no longer see students as kind of humans. They treat them more as impersonal objects. So kind of be thinking about that. To me, sometimes that can be a coping mechanism, right? Like I can't take on any more of that student's emotions or any of their trauma, so I have to treat them differently. But at the same time, it can lead to maybe not treating students within a relationship. So kind of think about that. And then personal accomplishment, just what do they feel like they've accomplished in their jobs? So I've accomplished worthwhile things. And really, our staff felt very accomplished in their job. They felt what they're doing is very worthwhile. So you can see here, and this is after emotional exhaustion and depersonalization both decreased after 2 years of implementation. So what you want to see is that, let me look at this. The brown indicates high levels. So for emotional exhaustion, you can see that first year, 54% of our teachers were indicating emotional exhaustion in the high levels. After 2 full years of implementation, that reduced down to 44%. But then you can see the pandemic hit in 2021 really hard, and then it bounced back up to 55%. So those first 2 years before the pandemic, you can see that was reduced, which is great news. Same thing with depersonalization. That number went down as well. So that fewer teachers were reporting even moderate to high levels of depersonalization. What you can see is personal accomplishment remained pretty high across the board, where over 90% of our teachers are saying, yes, we have high levels of personal accomplishment. So as you think about this, think about like, oh, so our teachers are emotionally exhausted and yet they believe in the work. So how can we do something with that? What does that look like? We also looked at overall well-being, and these are just a couple of items. I've been dealing with problems well, and I've been feeling optimistic about the future. And again, we see the same type of pattern where teachers had higher, you can see consistent levels of well-being across the first 2 years, and then it drops that 3rd year. In fact, when we looked at the data over time, this was a significant drop in well-being. And again, I think this is due to the pandemic, where you can see high levels building on the pandemic, and there's a lot of stress there. So we had promising initial findings where teachers reported the training was helpful, they were easy to implement. You saw that both emotional exhaustion and depersonalization decreased, well-being remained high, and then our MEF scores were on average across all sites. And that was executive function. And here, you can just read a couple of the quotes here and initial feedback after year 1, where teachers were saying, boy, I realize if we can teach these skills now, that's going to pay off later. So let's get them early, give them these coping skills, these skills to do, and we'll see it later. And then you can also see that the more they did the brain games, the easier it became to incorporate. We also find that M&M was helpful the first year of COVID. So right when COVID hit, in 2020, what we found is sites were saying, hey, this has actually been really helpful because we've been focusing on SEL, we've been focusing on coping strategies, and that was helpful in connecting with both their teachers and their parents. They were able to do some things, and you'll hear from Vivian, they did some things on Zoom with parents around SEL, and I think Miami was not the only site where they were able to do some of these things. So, we're going to talk a little bit about executive function as an outcome. Why would we want to do this? And what we know is that executive function is one of those things that you can improve with practice. So some things we know that it's difficult to change. Executive function you can change with practice. And that last one, the pattern or the relationship to mindfulness is repeated mindfulness practice strengthens the neural networks involved in attention. So again, if you go back to Dr. Jones-Harden's talk about the brain, this is that connection. So we're going to try to strengthen neural pathways that maybe these students are not coming in with, or we're going to make it even stronger. So executive function outcomes, and here you can see just kind of the pattern of scores. What we found is that the highest average across all sites was after that first full year of implementation. So if you think a standard score of 100, as average, at the end of the first year it was 97.7, and 9 out of 13 sites had their highest average score in the fall of 2019. So again, without the pandemic, we did see good gains, we saw strong scores, and then we also had teachers reporting that the students were actually prompting each other to use a strategy. They'd say, you need to use the breathing ball, or something if they saw a child escalated. They were generalizing the skills beyond scheduled time, which is what you want to see. We don't want to see children using that when we're telling them to, but can they start to use it on their own and across context? And then, again, using mindfulness strategies when upset. What we found, though, is like with COVID, and you can read these quotes here, but even focusing on mindfulness and stuff was not enough to overcome what happened with the pandemic. You saw burnout, you saw teacher shortages, right? You saw a lot of people leaving the field, and this is just not something that you can overcome that. But so you can see there that kind of last year there's a lot more variability in implementation. So what did we learn was, and you can see here that pilot testing of the mindfulness strategies was very helpful because we got teacher feedback. Teachers would say, we piloted like 15, and teachers were like, this one is never gonna fly in my classroom. Well, you need to hear that feedback from teachers because you might not know. Training with the teams, we generated buy-in. We were able to implement action plans. And what we found is incorporating the SEL and strategies led to a common language, and this is why it's important. It increases the number of opportunities for students to hear the language and practice skills. You're giving them more opportunities to practice, which is why it's important to build that brain connection. And then finally, the involvement of the leadership team was critical for implementation. So lessons from the evaluation data, teachers recognize the importance of their own self-care. Particularly, we started hearing, boy, if I don't take care of myself, I really find it hard to take care of my kids in my classroom. I need these breaks, and that has to be built in. And we started hearing directors saying, yeah, I need to give my team that time, my teachers that time. Implementation for strategies, students had positive impacts. And this is again pre-COVID, and then we had students demonstrating more skills of self-regulation and then beginning to generalize the skills and strategies. So that, any questions?
What would be the barriers? And we'll give you guys 5 minutes for that.
5 minutes.
Right. 3 pros. I think understanding where they come from. Empathy is business skills.
Can you guys hear me? Okay, so before we get into the problem that led us to the strategies that we're going to discuss today, it's important to note that empathy and compassion are not new strategies. They're things that we've always embodied in this field. But since COVID, there's been like a renewed interest and an emphasis on being more intentional with these concepts in our work. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. So I'm sure most of us have firsthand experience of how the pandemic changed our everyday lives. And we have a lot of specific examples of its impact on us, on our families, the children and families we work with. But it was even more detrimental for already marginalized communities, like communities of color, or communities and neighborhoods that experience poverty. And a lot of these communities are where our Educare sites are located. So for the early childhood education field in particular, we know that COVID caused an increase in cost for programs to stay open due to things like having to buy PPE. Behavior was being described as more challenging, disrespectful, or lacking common decency or home training. There's a perception that families needed to be held accountable for this behavior, and also a perception that families' needs should be held in higher esteem over staff needs. And so these negative perceptions created a culture of biases and isms. And an example of this could be like labeling kids born during the pandemic as COVID kids, which could lead to, us having negative preconceived notions about these children and their behaviors. So some specific data from the network show us that about 55% of teachers and 66% of family support staff indicated that the pandemic made their physical well-being, like exercise, eating, sleeping, either a little or a lot worse. And nearly 61% of teachers and 59% of family support staff indicated that the pandemic made their emotional well-being, or like their anxiety, mood, and depression, either a little or a lot worse. And then when they're prompted with, in the last 12 months, have you had 2 weeks or longer when nearly every day you felt sad or empty or depressed or lost interest in things you once loved? Nearly 35% of teachers and 26% of family support staff reported yes. So this data just gives us a glimpse into how the COVID crisis affected our Educare staff, and that further adding to the relevance of the work that we're going to showcase for you today. So what is the desired outcome of the strategies that we're going to talk about? We hope for a strong and stable workforce where everybody feels they play a crucial role in the success of the program. We want children and families to feel safe, comfortable, and welcomed into
to our school spaces and that they're inclusive of their values, their assumptions, and their beliefs. As Jerry Paul states, do unto others as you would have others do unto others. So we hope that by supporting staff, then they'll better be able to support the children and families in the program.
That is Paul, yeah.
So now we're going to get into the solution.
Increase salary. That's the solution.
I do want to point out that we all know that our own personal self-care is a part of our own personal work. But as leaders, we do have an obligation to make sure that we are meeting that need. And that first means that we notice the need. And as we notice that need, we do certain things like protect the space, protect the time and provide funding, educate and support, mentor and model, and embed into practice. And some of the things we tried in Kansas City would be build your balanced resiliency for all of our staff. Our leadership took it, and then our teachers took it as well. And that called for us to do like a three-part webinar where we completed our resiliency journals. We walked through what things keep us resilient, what things help to support our resiliency as individuals, and what we needed for each other to maintain that resiliency. So that was very powerful for a lot of staff. The next thing would be that we're all touch points trained and we all rely on those positive assumptions to lead us as we're talking about children and their development. And then we are heavily invested in conscious discipline. So we know that adults have to be composed in order to be attuned to what children's needs are. And so we're starting with the adults to make sure that they have that composure and to understand that they don't have to hide or shield from their feelings, that they can share those emotions with people, and we have space for that, and we have ways to help them unpack the things that they need to unpack so that they can be able to service children and families. Another tool that we have that was very underutilized was Sesame Street and Communities. We had been talking about using that resource. Our executive director assistant was saying, make sure you guys use Sesame Street and Community, and we were like, connected to one another, we understand what's going on with each other. So we spend time enough with each other. So with this trip to the Starlight Theater, we went to go see Prom and we went to go see Sister Act. And we were able to all be together and laugh and cry and meet each other's families and just spend time together. And that was an event sponsored by the Sunny Side of Wellness. Another event is bowling. So one of our professional development was done at Main Event, which hosts lots of different things, but we decided to have a bowling session after our PD. The staff loved it. So therefore we found another outlet where we could bring our families. It was a little bit cheaper. It was closer to where we were. And they showed up and they loved it. They brought their children, they brought their grandkids, and they had a ball. And it just kept us connected in a time that we felt disconnected because we were just coming back from COVID. So we need to kind of get that school feeling brewing again. Being seen, valued, and heard for all, this is big for some of our teachers and our home visitors. We know that we are uniquely individuals and we want to celebrate that uniqueness. So one of the ways we could do would be following the calendar. And for this year, this is our second year doing a Black History event. And we are moving those events we understand that it's not just once a month and we want to celebrate it every day, but we're going to start where we can. So in February, we're having these Black History events, and the teachers are leading this. And in May, we're going to have one for Hispanics. Our Hispanic and Latina teachers are leading it. So I'm excited for that. Another thing that the Sunny Side of Wellness does is they feed us. They bring in different types of food. This is one of our favorite food trucks. It's called The Melt. Yes, grilled cheese, everything cheese. And we love it. We're doing that are innovative. I'm super excited about things we've already tried. So we've met with several different consultants. We've talked with Dr. Amita Parker. She helped us with an equity retreat where we sat in affinity circles and we talked about any type of bias, any type of isms that we had experienced within our affinity group. So we had a group of Black teachers, white teachers, Native American teachers, Asian teachers, and others. And they were able in that space to talk through anything that has ever occurred in their life at work or how that affects their work. And that was very powerful. That got us set up to be able to Yesterday that we did a data dive, and our teachers really shared what they needed from us, and we listened to them. And something that came out of that was that we need more trauma-informed best practices. So we looked across our community. Who is doing this work? Who is doing this work well? And who is willing in this community to come partner with us? And so we found a center in Kansas City, Missouri. We're located in Kansas City, Kansas. They're just across the bridge. And they were like, we do this work. We did this work with children and families that are in the foster care. We do this work with the lens of diversity and equity, and we're willing to partner with you in a way that we're gonna bring our staff to you, and you guys get to come to us, and we get to sit and do a group reflection or PLC together for the next year.
And then in November, we do a thankful tree. In that tree there are some leaves, and so those are like blank leaves. So each staff will have to write 3 things that they are grateful for. 2 are personal, and 1 is work-related. In December, we also do a holiday spirit week, which we do like a holiday door competition, potluck, and sometimes a chocolate bar. In Black History Month in February, we also involve staff with fun activities like a twin day and the Battle of the Decade. Here is a picture of the therapy dogs. Some of our community partners will lend us their pets. This is also in honor of mental health awareness in May. Here, this is our first gala. So we did dress up in the 70s and 80s, and at that time we really feel like, we're celebrities. Yeah. So last year we also have our TV does as well. Some wellness activities include our Wellness Wednesday. So before COVID, we do have this salad bar. Every staff will contribute vegetables and everything like that. And then we also do smoothies. But then after COVID, in order to mitigate the risk of spreading the disease, we do a snack cart. We also have a monthly wellness challenge calendars, which we email to all staff, just for them to take a look at it every day. We also have our wellness survey where we recruit members of our committee, and this is part of our Teacher Appreciation Week. We also do Zumba and yoga classes. We do have a teacher before who is a yoga instructor.
And he dared us to think about all those things that would just make us stop in our tracks. And he made us conquer those things. So I wanted to bring that here to this space. A wicked problem is a social or cultural problem that is difficult or impossible to solve for as many as 4 reasons. 1 being incomplete or contradictory knowledge, the number of people and opinions involved, the large economic burden, and the interconnected nature of these problems with one another.
Any engines causing trouble, it's a killing spree. We got 2 engines running double in the 13. It's like I turn a stubble where they stand at my feet. Second and deep, we outside. When you see him with a bucket, boy, they
Which way we going, y'all?
very good.
We have a program of family engagement, but
So this is where the classrooms are on this end. And then across is the administrative hallway.
wow, how huge. Oh, how many corners? Which way am I going? Okay, I need a tour guide. How many classrooms?
There are 12 classrooms, 4 infant toddlers, 8 preschool. Now I haven't been here since 2016.
Oh yeah, we got the expert
Yeah,
with us.
so yeah, this is one, 2 of the infant toddler classrooms.
Mexico. I'm from New York.
3 of the buildings here.
When I visited Mexico City, it was.
This middle section is new, and then on the other side is another section just like this.
But there's 3 wings.
Long piece
Okay.
on the administrative side, and it was like this too.
So it's 3 buildings combined.
Yeah, 3 buildings that are built into the Educare. So this middle section right here is new for a new classroom.
Okay.
These classrooms are huge.
How are your lips? Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, this is the
Good. How's yours been?
It's been great.
Great. I went back to the teachers. I was like, here they come. They're coming back.
Yay! Teachers. This is an infant room.
Mm-hmm.
This is not. Oh, maybe they're now one.
Mm-mm.
But at the beginning of the school year, no, so we're always after COVID we were
Of the staff. There's tape. See, that's what we did. We missed that. I don't like to sit outside, but I would if it's up, if it's.
very cool. I actually have one of these. I forgot where I got it from. Okay, because I actually ordered the space kit so they can explore with everything. Yeah.
'Cause I didn't know if I was gonna stay, but I'm gonna stay.
Oh, next the playground.
I know it's too many people right there.
Right.
That is so
nice. And then you can have this space for rainy days when it's wet out there, for dry up here.
You guys keep the bottom and we'll keep the top right there. Hi, how are you? Hi, how are you? Welcome in. Yes, ma'am, you guys keep the bottom and we take the top. You can go ahead and get turn right here. Hi, how are you? Okay, we're gonna turn it up for you. This is your I've been looking for you. Check it out now. Good to see you. Hey, ladies.
Did you do the other? We did just this side, right? But not the other way. Okay, so we gotta go to that. To the lobby.
I'm getting lost.
Actually, we got off the track. Probably, yeah.
Now I'm gonna try to write some beats. Water's right outside here.
It's been a lot, but it's been really, yeah, it's been fun. That's generally I'm not a vegetarian, but I make my stomach anything vegetarian, and I get dessert.
I asked because I know Ron is sort of he's in that direction.
We miss you.
Okay. I miss you all too.
Isn't that? Thanks. Is he the parent?
It was our first time so we use for communication. A lot of the rhythms are call and response kind of thing.
Sure.
So when you hear something, you respond with something. And that's how the music works. So we bring djembe for sure. We bring doom doom. We bring a lot of percussion instruments like shakers, clave sticks, bells, the shaker ring.
Thank you. Okay. Oh, sorry. Oh, you're fine.
Yeah, the boy and the girl.
So the children folders to take home, parents sign in.
That's cool.
Oh, look at the colors. I love it.
We gonna take them out. Like, take them out. Say who say? Oh, Nicole, I checked this in. Way to go, Laura. Thank you for thinking about it. Okay.
You always video. For everybody to see.
Yes, we do all this ourselves. Mine was Tuesday, on Tuesday. We started sewing on Friday for next year.
This is my mom and her name is Adele.
See, like with me,
This is the basket.
and
That's the
you'll get mad because like I'll sew to like 3, I get up to 6.
Yeah. Awesome. Did you help make them?
So it does take a long time. So I don't know how many hours it might be. I say 2 things I don't want to know: how much money I spend on this and how.
Oh yeah, it's a lot of work, a lot of time.
And this is my sleeve.
What is this?
Now what is this? This is my sleeve jacket.
Oh, I see it now.
Yeah, like
Okay, I think sleeves on it.
it goes like this.
There we go.
This one is no, this is like that. And the tree, the Indian music is all right now. He got iPad 4 movies. My sister graduated from this.
Oh wow. You got his name?
I don't walk away being no longer.
Yes, but they never do. And then they go to the new staff pharmacy and they just put it together. It's not relax there. Did you get your man? We were trying to encourage that. I want this one to let it have that. But what is this? What is this information? So I like those. We don't have that.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
That's all what's
Information for the parent and the advocates, and gives them information about we're having Coffee Connect, any upcoming events. You know, if school is out, PD days, all that information is up there in the morning when they come in.
Do you see that they look at it? Can you tell? Like,
They say you gotta twist it. You pump it out.
Let's get it going, get it going, get it going now. You just wanna never get you what you see now. And head to the bathroom when you're beating now. It's my 3-6 song and the Spider-Man. Yeah, we done came up with it. Move your body to the right, move it to the left. You know the fuck you the same old 2-step. Hey, to the right.
Everybody doing something